Every culture has a version of this story. A man born into greatness leaves it behind. He wanders. He struggles. He bleeds for his own arrogance. And then, humbled, changed, stripped of everything he thought defined him, he comes home. He returns to his family, and the family takes him back. Because that is what family does. Because the story is about forgiveness and redemption and the unconditional nature of blood. That story is thousands of years old. You know it before it even starts. Every beat of it feels older than memory. But this is not that story.
Acknowledge me. Acknowledge me!
The man this story belongs to came home and decided humility was the thing holding him back the entire time. He returned to his family and informed them, coldly and with absolute certainty, that they answered to him now. He turned blood into a weapon. He built a family the way a man builds ammunition, identifying what each person could give him, extracting it, then discarding whatever remained once their usefulness ran dry. The prodigal son in every version of that story comes home carrying nothing. He came home carrying gold, a wise man at his shoulder, and the certainty that the throne belonged to only him. 1,316 days, 5 WrestleMania main events, a cousin broken inside a cell, another transformed into an enforcer, then reduced to a casualty, a man brought in from the outside who loved the family so sincerely that his sincerity became fatal, and the hand-picked successor who inherited every lesson he taught, including the one that says, the head of the table can only be the man capable of making them kneel. This is the story of a man who rewrote every rulebook in wrestling history and dragged wrestling into an era built around his gravity, who took the crown and wore it with a coldness and honesty that created something more compelling than any redemption story this company has told before or since. But to understand how he rewrote the story, you have to understand the years he spent trapped inside the version written for him. The forced smile, the scripted catchphrases.
This is my yard now.
The chosen hero manufactured to fight for the people, and why those years felt, to everyone watching, exactly like what they were. A king forced to dress like a jester.
Suck up, sellout, full of suffering, succotash, son!
So let's go back to the beginning. Before the Empire, there was a revolution. Before the blood was spilled, there was a brotherhood. Before the swords were drawn, there was only
Sierra, Hotel, India, Echo, Lima,
Delta.
Shield.
November 18th, 2012. Survivor Series, Indianapolis. 3 men in black tactical gear breach the barricade from inside the crowd, moving through the audience with the focused, practiced efficiency of something that has been rehearsed until it feels like instinct. They reach the ring. They drive Ryback through an announce table with a triple powerbomb that lands like a verdict.
No way!
CM Punk pins John Cena. The 3 men vanish back into the crowd they came from. The building sat with what it had just witnessed for a long moment. The industry spent considerably longer. The Shield was the most alive thing happening in WWE. 3 men in matching tactical gear, cutting handheld shaky cam promos that felt nothing like the polished, overproduced television surrounding them. Moving through arenas with a pack mentality that made every segment feel genuinely dangerous. They called themselves the Hounds of Justice. They declared they had arrived to correct a broken and corrupt industry. They attacked John Cena. They attacked Sheamus.
You know, Matt, Ryback is a huge...
They attacked Ryback. The men the company had spent years carefully engineering the crowd to love. And the crowd, the adult male audience that had spent half a decade sitting on its hands through manufactured coronations and recycled heroics, started making noise. Real noise. The kind that only happens when something on screen matches something the audience already believed in private. The company had designed them to generate heat. Instead, they generated the one thing that cannot be manufactured regardless of budget or booking: genuine belief. The matches validated everything. Seth Rollins was the engine, the workhorse who opened bouts, maintained pace, absorbed punishment, and kept everything moving at a velocity that made opponents look credible. Dean Ambrose was the chaos, Psychologically volatile, unpredictable, the man who carried the faction's voice with a natural promo ability that most performers twice his age couldn't approach. And Roman Reigns did one thing. He waited. He stood on that apron and held everything in reserve. Every second he waited built the pressure of what was coming. When Rollins or Ambrose finally slapped his hand and he came through those ropes, the temperature of the match shifted immediately. The crowd felt it before he'd thrown a single strike. There was a specific quality to Roman Reigns entering a ring, a density of threat, a physical certainty that whatever happened next would be final, that cannot be coached or scripted into a performer. Either a room feels it or it doesn't. Every arena in 2013 felt it the moment he touched the ropes. When the spear landed, the match ended.
It's illegal! With the clothesline. Spear!
Every time. The audience learned this quickly, and that learning transformed every Shield bout into something specific. A loaded gun aimed at whoever stood across the ring. The crowd watching the barrel track and knowing the trigger was coming and being unable to stop it. By 2013, they were immovable. They captured the United States and Tag Team Championships simultaneously. Total monopoly. Every available title at once. Their collisions with the Wyatt family drew the kind of crowd investment that only surfaces when two acts with genuine credibility meet at full speed and neither one flinches. The company that had booked them as mercenaries watched them become something the crowd refused to boo. Nobody turned them. Nobody rewrote the script. By WrestleMania 30, they were babyfaces by pure consensus. And at Payback in June 2014, they swept Evolution. Triple H, Randy Orton, Batista, in a no-holds-barred elimination match without losing a single man. The Shield at its peak was the best act in professional wrestling. But that tells you what Roman Reigns did inside it. To understand what he was made of, and why the industry would spend 6 more years failing to use it properly, you have to go back further than November 2012. You have to go back to the Bloodline.
I don't have to say too much more. One look is worth 1,000,000 words. One look is worth it all. Look at the eyes.
The Anoa'i family has been in professional wrestling for over 50 years, and for most of those 50 years, the industry stripped them of their identity to dress them in whatever costume the moment required. In the late 1970s, Afa and Sika Anoa'i arrived in the WWF as the Wild Samoans. Barefoot, grunting, eating raw fish.
This is the kind of...
Captain Lou Albano at their side to direct their violence because the characters were presented as too feral to direct themselves. 3-time tag team champions. The gimmick was built on deliberate dehumanization. And it worked commercially because that formula always works when you tell an audience something is primitive and frightening. Their nephew Rodney came to the WWF in 1992 and was repackaged as Yokozuna, a Samoan American born in San Francisco, dressed as a Japanese sumo wrestler, Mr. Fuji waving the Japanese flag at ringside. The entire presentation built on American anxieties about Japan's post-war industrial rise. The first man of Samoan descent to hold the company's top prize headlined 2 WrestleManias dressed as a citizen of a country he had no connection to, because what the promoter needed was a Japanese threat, and the actual heritage of the man in the ring was apparently interchangeable with whatever cultural anxiety the moment demanded.
Umaga!
Umaga in 2006 repeated the formula. Tribal tattoos, face paint, a handler to manage the violence. The template unchanged for 30 years. What the industry spent 4 decades refusing to ask was what the family actually was beneath the costume. In traditional Samoan society, there is a system called the Fa'amatai. It organizes family, village, and obligation into a hierarchy so old it has survived colonization, statehood, and everything modernity has thrown at the Pacific.
The Matai title as a calling, it is not something that you just get up and do.
At its head is the Matai, the chief, the one who carries the family's weight and in return commands its absolute loyalty. The title isn't simply inherited, it is earned and then acknowledged. By the family, by the community, by everyone who sits at the table below. The industry had been sitting on that material for 50 years. Instead of exploring it, WWE dressed it in Captain Lou Albano and told the audience these men couldn't speak English. Into that lineage, in 1985, Leati Joseph Anoa'i was born, son of Sika, cousin of The Rock.
Acknowledge me!
By the way, that's my cousin Joe.
who would later go by Roman Reigns.
Of Yokozuna, of the Usos.
Right, whose father is Sikoa from the Wild Samoans.
Yes.
Right?
The traditional Samoan tattoos across his arm and chest, ink placed there in grief after his cousin Eddie Fatu, Umaga, died in 2009. When he stands in that ring, the lineage is literally written on his skin. He became Roman Reigns. And then WWE dressed him in blue contact lenses and a SWAT vest and handed him someone else's lines. The family had spent 4 decades having its culture replaced by whatever the moment demanded. He was simply the latest iteration of a pattern the industry had never seen any reason to break. That severance would take 6 years and a global pandemic to repair. Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, and Dean Ambrose were brothers before they were famous. The forge that made them was the developmental gymnasium and the highway miles and the pressure of 3 men with no leverage trying to build something inside a system largely indifferent to whether they survived. The locker room had mechanisms for reminding newcomers of their place. Veterans who had spent years working their way up the card watched 3 developmental talents arrive and immediately occupy space near the top, and the resentment that produced was real. The 3 of them learned quickly that the only people inside that building they could trust completely were each other. That knowledge forged something the television cameras only partially captured. 3 men who had made a specific, unspoken agreement. We protect each other in here. Whatever the building throws at us, we face it together. The moment that agreement was tested most publicly came at the Elimination Chamber in February 2013. WWE's booking team had decided the Shield should lose, cleanly, definitively, to John Cena, Ryback, and Sheamus. Standard operating procedure. Dominant new act gets absorbed by the established top of the card. Ceiling confirmed, everybody moves on. They had watched what happened to the Nexus, a faction of rookies who arrived dominant, got fed to Cena at the first available opportunity, and were relegated to mid-card irrelevance within months. They understood exactly what the proposed finish meant for their futures.
You know, we got told that finish, and Chris and I went, what? That makes no sense. I mean, they gotta go over.
They drove home that night and made a decision in a rental car. They refused. 3 developmental talents, men with no contractual leverage, no political allies, no guarantee their jobs would survive the next round of budget cuts, walked into Vince McMahon's office together and told the most powerful man in professional wrestling they were not performing the finish as written. Any one of them alone would have been reminded quickly of his replaceable status and sent back to catering. Together, presenting a unified front to a man who understood power better than almost anyone in the industry. They held the line. McMahon changed the finish. The Shield survived. Roman Reigns carried that knowledge for the rest of his career. The idea that a circle of men bound by genuine loyalty is stronger than any individual operating alone. That a family, constructed from trust and the shared memory of holding a line together, is the most powerful structure in any room. He would spend the next decade trying to rebuild that circle. He would call it the Bloodline. He would build it from actual blood relatives rather than chosen brothers, and sit at its head rather than stand as one of 3 equal parts. The blueprint was drawn in those rental cars. We have a brotherhood. We have love for each other well beyond the wrestling, and it will always be that way.
It's because you're not feeling Uce?
These are not men performing nostalgia for the cameras. These are men who went through the forge together and came out changed by the same heat.
My real name is Joe.
Joe Anoa'i had already been through a different kind of forge before any of this started. He was 22 years old when a routine NFL physical revealed chronic myeloid leukemia. He had a newborn daughter at home and had just signed a free agent contract with the Minnesota Vikings after going undrafted from Georgia Tech, where he had been a first-team All-ACC defensive tackle. The entire architecture of his life had been built toward one destination. The blood work came back on the morning he was supposed to start arriving there. The Vikings released him the same day. He tried the Canadian Football League. The disease stripped too much conditioning from his body, and the comeback never held.
Did they cut you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. They sent me home. Once we got like all the proper oncology work back and the blood work back, they ended up releasing me.
And your wife was pregnant at the time.
Yeah, man.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
He retired from professional football without having played a single regular season game in the NFL. 23 years old, a daughter to feed, an identity that no longer existed.
Like working together and like a regular job. As office furniture installers.
To support his family, he took a job installing office furniture, alongside his cousins Jonathan and Joshua Fatu, the future Jimmy and Jey Uso, the future Bloodline.
No yeets.
The most celebrated wrestling dynasty in the history of the industry was moving office furniture together, because nobody was handing them anything. His father Sikoa eventually sat him down. The ring was waiting. The family name was waiting. Everything Sikoa and Afa had built, the championships, the Unoi name written into the permanent record of the industry, was a foundation waiting for someone to build on it. Joe signed a developmental contract with WWE in 2010, $500 a week. In a class run by Dusty Rhodes, he stood up one afternoon and declared himself a walking $1 billion check.
When I was making $500 a week down in FCW, the developmental before it was NXT, I cut a promo for Dusty Rhodes, but I pretty much said I'm a walking $1 billion check. And everybody looked at me like, heck, Dream knew exactly what I was. Everybody else, they were, they at the time, they were my peers, you know what I mean? They had no clue what was happening.
Dusty Rhodes went quiet. Triple H had a 20-minute meeting with him and turned to Rhodes afterward and said, "If that kid is not the biggest star we ever produce, we do not know what we are doing." The leukemia was the first fire. The furniture warehouse was the second. The developmental gymnasium at $500 a week was the third. Every one of those fires burned something away and left something harder in its place. The Shield was the final fire, and what it produced was a man who understood, on the deepest possible level, what becomes possible when you find people worth going to war beside. The Shield's final night arrived on June 1st, 2014. They swept Evolution. 3 legends sent home without taking a single casualty. The peak of everything those years had built, expressed completely in a match that left no ambiguity about what the Shield had become. 24 hours later,
Oh my God!
the image of Roman and Moxley on the mat, Rollins standing over them under the Authority's banner, landed with a weight the audience felt in their chests, because the Brotherhood had been visible every week for 2.5 years. Years later, asked to perform the emotion of that betrayal in a reunion angle, Roman looked Rollins in the eye and delivered a line that kayfabe barely contained.
I'll never forgive you for what you did to us.
The character was thin over something that actually hurt. Rollins walked out with a villain arc and a defined road to WrestleMania. Moxley walked out with the freedom to fully inhabit the chaos that had always been his truest quality. Roman Reigns walked out wearing the same tactical vest, carrying the same remixed Shield music, pointed at the company's top position and told to be the next John Cena. The Forge was gone. The architecture that had kept every developmental limitation invisible while placing every genuine quality on full display, gone. The company had watched a crowd cheer Roman against a Batista coronation they despised, and decided that was unconditional endorsement. They had pointed the weapon they made at WrestleMania and pulled the trigger. The man who had survived leukemia and warehouse floors and $500 weeks was real, and his gifts were real. The character they were about to ask him to perform was a costume with nobody inside it. Philadelphia was 2 months away, and Philadelphia was going to say so at the top of its lungs.
And the moment that it actually happens, it's like they're playing the worst soundtrack of all time over your moment.
WrestleMania 32, 100,000 people inside AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas. The belt raised above his head, and walking up that entrance ramp beside him is his 8-year-old daughter. The noise coming from those 100,000 people is not celebration. It is the loudest, most sustained chorus of hatred ever directed at a man holding a world championship in the history of this industry. The kind of noise that does not stay in the arena when you walk back through the curtain. The kind that follows you into the silence after your daughter has fallen asleep, and you are sitting alone with the belt that was supposed to mean you had made it. The cage was forged in gold, but it still remained a prison. The morning after WrestleMania 32, someone at WWE headquarters looked at the quarterly numbers. Attendance, 101,763, a world record. Revenue, strong. Network subscriptions, holding. The spreadsheet showed a successful WrestleMania. The spreadsheet could not hear what happened inside AT&T Stadium when Roman Reigns won the championship. Professional wrestling used to operate on a brutally honest feedback loop. If fans believed in the story, they spent money. If they rejected it, they stayed home. The box office told the promoter the truth within 24 hours. A bad babyface was expensive. That feedback loop is what forced Vince McMahon to recognize Hulk Hogan's value in 1984, and what eventually forced WCW's hand when crowd reactions stopped matching booking decisions. The audience's money was always the final authority. Then WWE dismantled that system entirely. In 2014, the WWE Network replaced pay-per-view with a $9.99 monthly subscription. A subscriber who despised the main event of WrestleMania still paid the following month because they wanted to watch NXT or rewatch the Attitude Era. Revenue was guaranteed regardless of the specific story at the top of the card. Simultaneously, WWE locked in television rights deals worth billions. NBC Universal for Raw, Fox for SmackDown, guaranteeing money at the corporate level, completely independent of any given arena's reaction. The boos of 101,763 people, the largest crowd in wrestling history, expressing the loudest possible version of a single, unified opinion, were, from a revenue standpoint, mathematically equivalent to silence. The machine had built itself a buffer against the consequences of its own decisions, then mistaken that buffer for evidence that the decisions were correct. The company had also fundamentally misread the John Cena precedent. Cena's polarization had been profitable, and management spent a decade internalizing a false lesson, that a divided audience was a passionate one. What they missed was the distinction that mattered. Cena's rejection was of a trajectory, a character who had first gotten over organically and then been corporatized. Reigns' rejection came from an audience that had watched the corporate machinery operate in plain sight before any organic connection had been built, and collectively decided not to pretend they hadn't seen it. The fix was visible. When fans know the fix is in, they don't suspend disbelief. They fight it. January 25th, 2015. Wells Fargo Center, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The audience coming in that night carries a specific expectation. Daniel Bryan, the technically brilliant, organically beloved underdog who had won the WWE Championship at WrestleMania 30 through sheer accumulated crowd momentum, had relinquished it due to injury, and spent months fighting his way back, is in the Rumble match. The audience has decided he is going to win it. WWE has a different plan. Bryan enters early. The crowd goes sideways with excitement. Then Bray Wyatt catches him, and Daniel Bryan is eliminated in the first third of the contest. The Wells Fargo Center doesn't boo. It roars. The genuine, disbelieving roar of an audience that has just realized the script is going somewhere they refuse to follow. Every subsequent entrant is greeted with the sound of thousands of people who have withdrawn their consent from the proceedings. Reigns enters at number 19. Older heels like Big Show and Kane systematically eliminate the popular performers who might steal the spotlight, leaving Reigns the obvious winner by process of elimination. The crowd recognizes every beat of this choreography and responds with escalating fury.
Eliminated. Well, wait a minute. There he is.
Reigns wins. WWE deploys its emergency response. Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, Roman's real-life cousin, a man who could walk into any arena in the world and receive a thunderous ovation by simply existing, appears at ringside to raise Reigns' hand. The Philadelphia crowd boos The Rock. Boos The Rock. In 2015, the machine had sent its most powerful asset into a burning building and watched it catch fire alongside everything else. Roman himself would later describe that night as the worst soundtrack he had ever heard, playing over a moment that was supposed to belong to him. The hashtag Cancel WWE Network trended globally within the hour. Dave Meltzer gave the match 1 3/4 stars. Philadelphia was the clearest piece of communication a live wrestling audience had delivered to a wrestling company in a generation. The audience was telling WWE, with extraordinary precision and volume, that the authority to assign meaning to Roman Reigns was being claimed by a corporation that had not yet earned it from the people who needed to believe. WWE heard the volume. They could not hear the meaning. WrestleMania 31 in Santa Clara, Reigns versus Lesnar, brutal and physically credible.
Seth Rollins comes up the
The crowd's response was pure physical relief. Not excitement for Rollins. Relief that the other outcome hadn't happened. A heel stealing the title through treachery became the most popular moment on the show because it meant Roman Reigns didn't win. WrestleMania 32 in Dallas drew 100,000 people. Reigns faced Triple H, and the crowd cheered Triple H with genuine enthusiasm. When Reigns won, WWE turned down the live arena microphones and piped artificial cheers over the broadcast. 80,000 people were physically present and acoustically irrelevant. The machine was manufacturing the reality it wanted on television because the reality inside the building was too damaging to air. WrestleMania 33 in Orlando. The following night on Raw, Reigns stood in the ring while the crowd delivered 10 unbroken minutes of the most sustained hostile reception a performer has received in the modern history of this business. He stood in it. He paced. He waited until the building had nearly exhausted itself. Then he raised the microphone.
This is my yard now.
He dropped the microphone and walked away. In that single exchange, the absorption, the cold patience, the refusal to apologize, was the precise character WWE would spend another 3 years refusing to let him play. WrestleMania 34 in New Orleans was his 4th consecutive main event, the same opponent, and the crowd had moved past anger into contemptuous indifference. Sections of the Superdome inflated beach balls and batted them around the arena. The main event of the biggest show in professional wrestling had become background noise. In 2016, Pro Wrestling Illustrated readers voted Reigns the most hated wrestler of the year, the first babyface to receive that award since the category's inception in 1972. Raw viewership had reached its lowest point in 20 years. The company's response was to give him another title match. October 22nd, 2018. Providence, Rhode Island. Monday Night Raw.
I feel like I owe everybody an apology.
Roman Reigns walked to the ring in street clothes. The crowd booed him before he touched the microphone because the crowd always booed him. He told them his name was Joe. He told them he had been living with leukemia since he was 22 years old.
And unfortunately, it's back.
The arena went silent. The man they had spent 4 years screaming abuse at had been managing a blood cancer in private the entire time.
And I'm gonna have to relinquish the Universal Championship.
He walked up the ramp. The crowd chanted his name, Joe, not the character, the man. He had been telling the truth about himself the entire time. The character was the lie. The company could not hold the lesson for a single broadcast. Later that same night, WWE executed Dean Ambrose's heel turn, booking a wrestling angle on the emotional coattails of a cancer diagnosis. The costume had been ripped open. The real man had stood exposed and moved people genuinely, and the company's instinct was to use that exposure as a prop. Reigns returned in February 2019.
I'm in remission, y'all.
And received the loudest, most genuine ovation of his babyface era. WWE gave him Shane McMahon feuds, Saudi Arabia matches, then Baron Corbin. The Corbin program culminated in a segment where Reigns was handcuffed to a ring post and canned dog food was poured over his head while a mid-card performer mocked his nickname.
You want to be the big dog?
He was 34 years old, the flagship star of a company generating hundreds of millions per year in television rights alone. Paul Heyman recalled the words exactly.
He's had enough of the creative. These things are running concurrently. The feud rivalry story with Baron Corbin over dog food and the infamous Suffer and Succotash promo had weighed on him enough to where he said, I've had enough. I've reached the cap. I can't go any further as the big dog. I've peaked.
March 2020. The pandemic shut down the touring industry. Roman Reigns, whose leukemia had left his immune system permanently compromised, went home. The company edited him out of video packages and instructed commentary not to say his name. In that silence, away from the buildings and the scripts and the golden cage and everything it had cost him, Roman Reigns arrived at an irrevocable conclusion. The big dog had a ceiling. He had found it. The character was wrong in the way a costume is wrong, built for someone else, in someone else's size. He knew what fit. The family. The bloodline. The Samoan chief at the head of a table that had existed in the Anoa'i lineage for 50 years of wrestling history, waiting for the moment the cameras were finally willing to look at it. He called the company with one condition. He was coming back as a villain, mostly unscripted, building the character the Machine had spent 6 years suppressing. He would come back as himself, or he would not come back at all. Vince McMahon, watching SmackDown ratings drain and his Universal Championship picture built around a supernatural swamp monster, agreed. 5 days before SummerSlam, Heyman received a phone call. McMahon said 4 words: "I'm envisioning Roman Reigns." They had 5 days to build the character the Machine had spent 6 years burying. They built the Tribal Chief. August 23rd, 2020, SummerSlam, the Thunderdome, Orlando, Florida. The main event is over. The copyright graphic is in the corner. The show is done.
Oh my God, what the hell? Who the?
Roman Reigns materializes in the ring. No music, no announcement, no entrance. He is simply there, the way a verdict is simply there when the jury returns. He is wearing a black shirt that reads "Wreck everyone and leave." His eyes carry something that was always suppressed and always suppressed and has finally been allowed to surface. He spears Bray Wyatt, destroys Braun Strowman with a steel chair until the metal bends, spears Wyatt again, lifts the Universal Championship. He does not smile. He does not pump his fist. He holds the title in the air and looks into the camera with the expression of a man who has finally stopped pretending. Here is what nobody said loudly enough in August 2020. The Thunderdome was an accidental paradise for a cold, methodical, psychologically precise heel character. To understand why, consider what the same environment did to Braun Strowman first. Strowman's entire commercial value lived in kinetic spectacle, in the gasp of a live audience watching a man that size move that fast, flip an ambulance, press slam a human being across a ring with impossible ease. Strip away the crowd, and those moments don't just lose their impact, they lose their reason for existing. Strowman's championship reign through 2020 was a correct diagnosis of a mismatch. A performer whose power was entirely generated by live energy, placed in an environment that had removed it entirely. He held the title as a placeholder, and most people watching understood that, including him. The same environment that hollowed out Strowman was perfectly calibrated for what Roman Reigns was about to become. In a live arena, a villain with this creative direction faces constant friction. Live crowds chant "what" during deliberate pauses. They cheer ironically for heels they find entertaining. They hijack segments that move too slowly. The Thunderdome eliminated all of that. The audio was controlled. The reactions were curated. A man who wanted to speak quietly, to let silence do work, to pause for 3 full seconds and let the weight of a sentence press against a room, that man could do exactly that. For a performer whose power lived in spectacle, removing the crowd was castration. For a performer whose power lived in stillness and physical authority and the cold certainty of a man who never needs to raise his voice, it was a studio built to his exact frequency. The empty room was the only room in the world built for what was coming. August 28th, SmackDown. A WWE official named Adam Pearce pushes open a locker room door looking for a contract signature. Roman Reigns is seated in an armchair, completely still. The stillness of a man who understands that everything comes to him eventually. He lets Pearce stand there in the silence. Then the camera moves slightly, and Paul Heyman is sitting beside him. The internet came apart. Because what that single image communicated without a word of explanation was everything.
Believe that.
The most dangerous physical presence in the industry, alongside the most brilliant verbal mind in its history, and the power flowing entirely in one direction. Heyman is not leaning back with the confidence of a man who controls the room. He is leaning forward with the attentiveness of a man who serves it. Roman looks at Pearce and says he will sign on his terms, delivered quietly, without emphasis, as a plain statement of fact. The age of performing other people's expectations was finished. Everything else would arrange itself around him. Roman's natural register is silence and implication. His power lives in his body before it ever reaches his voice. The cold patience, the density of threat, The quality of a man who never needs to raise his voice because the alternative to compliance is always understood. 6 years of WWE scripts asked him to talk over all of that, to fill the silence with catchphrases and manufactured warmth and lines Vince McMahon had approved. Heyman understood the silence. He arrived as special counsel, not advocate, not promoter, but servant. The most gifted talker in wrestling history, performing visible deference to a man who rarely raised his voice above a conversational register. Heyman provided the elaborate language and the sweeping declarations. Roman arrived at the end of all that language to deliver 2 or 3 sentences that landed like a closing argument. The space between Heyman's last word and Roman's first became the most compelling moment in any segment they shared. In a creative meeting somewhere in those early weeks, Roman said something that stopped the room. Respect my work. Acknowledge what I do. Give me my flowers now. Heyman recognized it immediately, the character finding its own voice. A man who had spent 6 years being told by arenas full of people that he was not enough, turning around and demanding the world reckon with what he actually was.
Acknowledge me.
Acknowledge me. 2 words. The most honest thing Roman Reigns had said in front of a camera in 6 years. And the reason it worked was simple. He was not performing it. He was meaning it. Every single time. The title came at Payback on August 30th. Roman did not come to the ring at the opening bell. He let Wyatt and Strowman destroy each other and the ring itself, watched 2 men exhaust themselves completely, then walked down the ramp with Heyman beside him, stepped through what remained of the ropes, covered Strowman, and won the Universal Championship without absorbing a meaningful strike. The opportunism was total, and the total opportunism was the entire message. The tribal chief determined the conditions under which he competed. That was the power. This is my island. When you have this kind of power, all you have to do is show up and win. In old stories, the wandering son returns with dust on his feet and emptiness in his hands. Roman Reigns returned carrying a kingdom. The Universal Championship rested against his shoulder. Paul Heyman walked beside him like a witness to prophecy. And somewhere beneath the lights stood the same man who once told a room full of laughter that he was $1 billion check. The Ula Fala settled around his neck. The bloodline fell in beside him. The table was set, and the man at the head of it had already decided that the only thing left to ask of anyone in that room was the same thing. Acknowledge me. It looked like the end of a story. It was the beginning of one. And the first chapter of what came next had a name. Jey Uso. The Bloodline Saga continues in Part 2, Day 1, the Usos. The family dinner, the Hell in a Cell, the moment Jey Uso said the words that changed everything, and how a storyline built in an empty room became the loudest thing in professional wrestling.